Welcome to the first, hopefully not the last, YaLLa Compass update, which we're going to do every month. We're going to sit down with some very well-known voices. You might not see their faces all that much, but you'll recognize who they are, who are involved in the YaLLa Compass Contenders series and are working on a lot of the YaLLa Compass tournaments. And they're going to give you a quick recap of what's happened during this month and what you should expect for next month. And we're just basically going to chat Counter-Strike, which is what we all love. So Travis is joining us today, as well as Wildeity. We're going to be talking about everything Contenders 1, because that's what happened during the month of May. And gents, I mean, let me jump straight into it. If you want to give me overall thoughts, because I think that this is always a good starting spot. And Trav, we'll start with you. If you had to kind of summarize Contenders 1 in one go for the month of May, how would you do it?
I would say that it's just an important tournament for the scene in general, because, like, I think ranked tier 2 tournaments, while there are a lot of them, the fact that you get consistent tournaments across the board at this level allows teams to really show what they're made of and actually push into those sort of VRS invite stages for other big tournaments as well. I mean, these cups are relatively small, but we're seeing consistent patterns now of 2 or 3, maybe 4 teams looking really good across separate tournaments at this level. And I think that this having an extra Compass event, obviously, more to come over the course of the year, will sort of give you a picture of how these teams actually look. I think there are some particular teams that played in Contenders 1 that are actually really worthy of keeping an eye on as we kind of move on as well.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I'd also like to point out that while, Trav, you were talking about how there might be like 3 or 4 teams at a really high level, I feel like very recently Tier 2 has become so dangerous that you'll see a new brand name or you see a new lineup pop up like 3 months ago, and then suddenly they'll be winning something, right? You could probably, well, obviously the names on Astrum aren't like that, right? But the fact that they added Grix to their roster, immediately shot up to the top. There's many examples of that within the scene, and I feel like Contenders did a really good job of condensing all of that into this monthly package.
My favorite thing, obviously, now with the VRS system as it stands, and there's lots of faults, but what I do love is how these, I don't want to say newer teams, but the lesser known teams, if you like, who've been grinding away at tier 2, now have an opportunity to kind of step up and go head to head with the top dogs. And when you have a lot of events like Contenders, it allows that opportunity for teams to grind those VRS points and do just that. Now we want to focus in though on, I suppose, the teams that you think made the biggest impact in Contenders 1. And Wildeity, we'll start with you because you mentioned them. Astrum, obviously they were the winners of the grand final. What was it about this team that you loved so much?
The thing about Astrum is that they've won for the pure reason that the sum of their parts is so much stronger than everybody else on the server. Like, when you've got a player like Grix, when you've got a player like Patsy, you've got players like Klax who are just so far above the rest of the competition. I feel like it almost felt like the inevitable. And I mean, it might seem a little mean to say this, but a few times, like when I was seeing some of the other teams fall apart a little bit, it felt like everybody else was competing for second place with how good they looked.
Trav, in agreement with that?
Yeah, see, the thing with Astrum is, right, like, Norvi and Kenzie, for such a long period of time, have been, like, 2 of the best tier 2 names, right? In Aurora, before, obviously, I think I heard from one of the interviews that Astrum is actually an org, so it's not like, they haven't moved on from Aurora to not an unorged project. And, yeah, I mean, 2 separate stints, I think, on Aurora. Norvi and Kenzie were kind of the 2 men to really keep an eye on. I think at the beginning of, like, 2024, beginning at some point in 2023, they were the best team in tier 2 for me by quite a way. Kenzie's always been a very, very good player as well. As I said, for those name value players that they have, adding Patsy to the mix as well, of course, who has significant experience in tier 1. Klax is just a really important and stable player. You can add the superstar factor of Grix, who's been talked up, for big moves to go to tier 1 maybe. They were actually on bad form. For their name value, they're on pretty poor form going on into this tournament. And they were not really making deep playoff pushes. They were not looking too consistent at all. And for players like this, it kind of wasn't acceptable. So to finally get an important win like this, and that semi-final against Paravision, I think was a really good example of actually a high-quality game and sort of the level that they can play at. So finally, we're seeing some something from them. And yeah, I think that was a critical win as well, because I think they won like a Galaxy Battle tournament or something like that, but that was a very small tournament in online. It wasn't really that notable. And to finally get wins over Paravision and Passion UA to win this thing, I think it's, it's finally showing what these players, we know what they're capable of, showing it finally.
Do you think they were a bit hard done by the Aurora purchase of Eternal Fire? Do you think that was, I mean, that's the controversial question, right?
I think the thing is that if you look at Aurora, you have an opportunity to buy a team that's going to get you stickers. You look at the form of the Aurora roster before they got dropped, it was like a no-brainer, right? I mean, you have to move on. And yeah, they made absolutely the right decision. I don't think that, they're going to be regretting that in any way, shape or form, because that sticker money is gonna keep it injecting for a while.
Fair points. I tell you what, let's take a look at who came second, because this is a lineup I obviously have ties to, because the South African coach, TC, leaving Complexity and finding his way into Passion UA. I mean, Wildeity, how do you feel about this Passion UA lineup as it looks currently?
I mean, in general, the lineup looks really good, right? Like, they've been doing well. Second place against a team like Astrum is fine. But I think it was Travis that posted on Twitter that very recently, they've had some interestingly shaky results where they're having quite a bit of trouble finding themselves on the scoreboard. And that's kind of, that should be expected to be an issue for Passion UA. They're obviously now with like new coaching and all that, I do expect there to be some teething issues. So it's likely that you're going to see very inconsistent performance, but it's very difficult to judge this team right now. I feel like we need to give them like 2, maybe 3 months to see how they're going to develop into the roster that they're meant to become.
Do you think that the current system as it stands, this is a broader conversation, I suppose, actually gives teams time to develop at the moment? I mean, is there any time? You kind of have to get on the ground running if you want to collect points, especially if you're grinding through tier 2, right?
Yeah, but I think the thing is for Passion UA is that they had a core still to keep themselves relevant, right? I mean, we've seen all these teams, Falcons buying a core, Heroic buying the Sangal core, etc., etc. The fact they still had a core to fall back on is fine. We've seen how long it takes a team that doesn't have a VRS core with any ranking to fall back on at all to actually grind to the top. Look at NIP, right? And you could argue the only reason they're actually relevant again now is because of one open qualifier run. Like that I had a chance to cover a lot of their games on my personal stream in the open qualifier and the closed qualifier for PGL, and if NIP didn't get that opportunity, they would have not had the injection of points they would have had, and they would still be having to be, playing these CCTs. I mean, they still are, but they would still have to be playing extra CCTs to really get to that top point to actually get any invites at all. So the fact they got one in a scene that is very bereft of open and closed qualifiers now, unfortunately. Yeah, like you need a core to fall back on. So for Passion UA, the fact they had that was excellent. I've got a lot of thoughts on this team, but I'll let Faraz jump in first.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to add to your point there, right? I get that there's like so many tournaments that are going to be adding to your points and stuff like that, but it does disincentivize people from being a bit more experimental with your roster, right? The most experimental team right now would probably be Team Spirit, but that's because they've got the budget and the scouting ability to have like 1,000 different rosters, right? But then also that is in a way being grandfathered in with the main roster, right? I feel like risking it all on newer players and stuff like that just won't ever happen again with any of the bigger organizations.
We'll definitely talk about the Team Spirit conversation, because I want to touch on something you said, but let's keep the focus in on Passion at the moment, because Trav, you said you have lots of thoughts. I would love to hear them.
Okay, so I really, really love this team. I think that if you're going to put like a label on them to begin with, I would be saying that, yes, inconsistency is very obvious, but if they're not a team that is like really, really strong MRQ contenders for Starladder Budapest, I would be very, very surprised. I mean, they've lost their 2 main players. They've lost their IGL and probably, I would say, to be fair, arguably the best AWPer in Tier 2 in Jambo to Fnatic, and you've had to rebuild again. And to be fair, I think they've made the 2 best choices they could have possibly made. I mean, you're getting Kvem, you're getting Warrior2K, you're getting Topper as the in-game leader. You're getting Demka as well from Monty. Demka is a very, very underrated player. I mean, I know, Sam. We've been involved in lots of ESL challenges in the past. Like we know Demka from Monty and how reliable he can be. I really love him as a player. I think he's critical to this team right now. The thing that does worry me, even though I love the pieces and I think they should and will be a contender, if they're not, it's going to be a big disappointment, is, as I said, the inconsistencies of them. I mean, Kfem, when I watched him play, is brilliant. He can secondary AWP alongside Warrow, and that makes the team extra dangerous, especially on CT sides. They're kind of still getting trounced by some, like, domestic rivals. They lost to TNL, which is another Tier 2 team on the come-up. You will have never heard of any of these names on the roster if you're, like, not really close watching Tier 2. Only the fact that, you know, Kane is their CEO, ex-Navi, Gambit guy, and their coach is JR from, I think, the Vega Squadron days back in 2017. But, yeah, I mean, they're losing to regional rivals like TNL. They're losing to Navi Junior. That's not the end of the world. We know how damn good they are. But, like, still, you would expect a team of Passion UA's quality, even earlier on in their cycle, to probably be beating those guys. And that's what concerns me a little bit, even though I'm still convinced, as I said, they'll be in the MRQ conversation come the end of the year. I've got stuff to work on. I think Topper's fine as an in-game leader, but people will be looking at the roster and saying, why isn't Warrow AWP in-game leading again like he used to good success, right? So I think Topper's doing fine, but they need to iron out these issues, and hopefully Time, which they do have now. You mentioned Time in Tier 2 with the VRS. I think they have got a bit of time now to work with, because they've actually had some decent results, making playoffs, deep playoff runs nearly every single time. So hopefully in the future that time will give them ability to grow.
Trav, I wanted to add to this because, like, I have a small disagreement with you here. I get that they should on paper just be running over all the smaller teams, right, just because of the names they've got, and they should have a baseline, right? But very recently, especially when you have as many tournaments as you know, like Compass has in the circuit coming up, I feel like the skill floor for Tier 2 is so high now that shifting any pieces will give you major teething issues. Like, you just can't get past a lot of teams with pure individual firepower anymore.
I mean,
you
yeah.
want to respond to that, Chad?
I don't think that's that unfair, but I also think that, look at the play style of the likes of a TNL that I referred to. They have a giga aggressive style. I mean, I've watched them, you know, push on CTD2 nearly every single round, and it worked to great effect. They had a great run in a recent CCT. And Passion UA, when I watched them play against them I think it wasn't in the CCT game the other week, TNL 1-2-1, they tried to play a style which was fighting the firepower with their own firepower. And it felt like they were almost being dragged out of their comfort zone because of the way TNL play. You know, that's actually kind of interesting, kind of goes along with what Faraz is saying, right? Because they're having to use their firepower and got beat by an unknown 5 in a way. I mean, if you look at the roster, they haven't played in anything relevant other than winning a small Swedish LAN, TNL. That's what proves to me that they are legit, by the way, winning that small Swedish LAN. And they took Falcons to a third map OT in the IEM Dallas qualifier early in the year as well, TNL. So I actually think they've shown, like, almost more impressive aggressive maneuvers and a sort of stylistic way of playing than Passion UA have at this current stage. Maybe that's due to the synergy. Maybe that's what I'm saying, like, the roster needs time. There's more synergy for TNL, who've been together a little bit longer as a group. So yeah, I think Faraz has got a decent point there, but still, I'm still convinced they're not going to disappear. They're always going to be around these playoff runs at this level in the next few months or so, post-player break for sure.
I'll throw a span in the works. I think there's massive amounts of pressure on the coach of Passion UA. And I mean, obviously, I'm a fan. TC and I have grown up together. But at the end of the day, this is the first time we actually see him coaching a lineup that isn't led by JT. And that's a big thing. I know that he's coached teams in South Africa, but outside of that, all we've seen is what he's done with Complexity, working with one IGL. So the true question is he actually a legitimate coach? Can he get this team to perform? They got to the grand finals, but in order to be judged, you need to be winning. So that's extra pressure, if you like. I want to focus on our semi-finalists before we get into some of the special moments from contenders. So we're going to talk now about Spirit Academy. Can we please discuss what is this news that I have recently seen? I mean, Wildeity, you tapped on it. How many academy rosters do they want exactly?
Team Spirit, white, black, there's
green.
Is there a green roster?
I think there was a green, like, you know, the 14 and 13-year-olds or whatever. Yeah.
Are you sure that's not Falcons or? But yeah, so Spirit Academy definitely has quite a few players. And I feel like, personally, the most insulting part for me when I saw that news was, like, I started rapidly scrolling through those 14-year-olds, waiting to find one guy on the list that I had more elo than. I had zero. Zero.
But how does this work realistically? Because of the conflicts of interest, because of how different events are structured, realistically, other than the main roster and the Spirit Academy we currently know, are we really going to see any of these other teams, Trav?
I think they're like made to play ESEA leagues. Like they're going to be in open, main, advanced. I think like if that. I think you've got Spirit Academy with the state they're in. They've got their roster, which that is going to have a very valuable VRS core to pick up if they do eventually move on from Spirit. If a new TO wants to come in and wants to get a really good tier 2 roster to kind of build off of, you can pick up Spirit Academy at this point, even if it's Kyosuke-less. All the other rosters they've got, it just reeks of they're going to be let go eventually. Like it's all just a project to sign some like younger players on some low salaries where it doesn't hurt them as an organization in terms of the cost they're putting into it, but it could give them great reward in time. If one of these players turns out to be a goddamn superstar again, you've had your Donks, your Zontixes, your Artfrosts, now you've got your Kiyosukes and your Alcarens. They could find another one or two of those, sell those on, and immediately the 3 separate teams has made a profit, right? So yeah, it's worth a gamble, I think, for the Spirit side. And Overdrive, listen, whatever we want to say about Overdrive, is a bit of a polarizing figure. But, like, I think he knows what he's looking for and has got a good track record.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Trav. That's sort of the point I wanted to make as well, where you can essentially farm, like, 20 players at bargain bin prices before they've even hit the pro scene. They're like 3,500, 4,000 elo. You get to you basically get to them before any of the big teams do. You get to potentially sell them. You get to keep the best players for yourselves. And this kind of reminds me of like okay, maybe this is a bit of a stretch, but this is kind of how like Chinese weightlifting schools work, where they just get the kids who have the best performances very early on in like gymnastics and weightlifting classes, and they send them to the best schools. But everybody else, because they're also being coached and all that, they get to slightly less proficient schools, but if they somehow make it big, they're still representing China at the end, right? So I feel like it kind of works in that way.
It does feel a bit like found Donk, this generational talent, right? All this noise around Kyosuke, and then this team comes in and offers you mad money for him, allegedly. So you kind of go, hold on, you know what we should do? We should just lock so many young kids into these contracts because, hey, maybe we've already made 2, maybe we can make 3, maybe we can make 4. However, saying all of that, I would like to suggest to Team Spirit that English lessons probably quite important, because if you want to expand that market with your players, that you want to get out of just Russian speaking. But seeing as we brought his name up, I got to talk about him. Kyosuke, all the hype. I mean, gents, you've watched him play now in Contenders for the last month. The buyout figure, the cost of going to Falcons, is it worth it? Is he going to be the quote-unquote next Donk, Trav?
Well, I think firstly, the thing that does tend to annoy me is everyone like equating him with Donk, because Donk is generational. Like it is a reality of the situation that he's come from the same academy team. He's gonna probably go onto a big tier 1 roster. People are gonna say, "Oh, next Donk! Oh my goodness!" But he plays a very different way. I feel like. I mean, what I will say is one of the things that has really impressed me the most about him is just that he just doesn't give a shit, really. Like clearly in every single interview, he's a bit like Donk in that way when it comes to his sort of personality of, listen, I just want to win. I just want to play Counter-Strike, play it to a good level and win. I had a chance to cast multiple of his matches in this season of Compass. There was one game he played where he actually dropped his like 2nd career best rating. It was a game on Train. I think it went like 27-6 or something crazy. It was like a 2.6 or something wild like that. He's farming Favbet. It's Bondic in big 2025. That's not like huge. It's a bit of a different level from Bondic to playing on Falcons. It's starting to watch, and I firmly believe that he's actually the best M4A4 player actually in tier 2 and maybe in the scene overall, because like there's a couple of clips which I'll as I said to you, but I think before we went live, I'll drop to you later. Maybe you can add into the edit. But like, it's the cleanest sprays you've ever seen, and sure, you can tell the Favbet players are kind of feeding him in a way, but like, it's just the pure calmness and brutality of just how way he goes about things. And I'm a little bit worried about how he's going to play on Falcons, because I do think that You know, he's played a very small amount, shown a very small amount of his LAN capability. There's smaller LANs in Russia. Sure, he's won a couple of them, beaten the likes of Paravision, whatever. But going on to Falcons is going to be a completely different story, and I'm actually of the opinion that I think it might take him longer than people think to truly show, like, it's not going to be Donk and turn up to Katowice and drop a 1.7 over the tournament. Like, that's not gonna happen. I think Kyosuke will be good, but I think he might disappoint because of the expectations put on him. I think actually it's a few quotes I had that I just prepared before we went live. Like, he thinks himself he's overrated. So, you know, I think we need to sort of temper expectations. The community won't do that. Like, not everyone's going to watch this podcast. Not everyone's going to agree with me. But, like, we need to temper our expectations for sure.
I feel like it's really difficult to be wrong here, right, Travis? Because the benchmark the benchmark that the community has set is, okay, probably the best player of all time. Like, come on, Kyosuke, it's really hard to live up to that. Even if he makes it close, he'll still be somehow disappointing. I mean, I feel like that the burden of expectations there is just too great, in my opinion. That being said, though, the archetype you described of Kyosuke just not giving a shit and, well, being really good on the server, that holds up in Tier 2 so far, but you're right. I don't know how that translates into Tier 1 because we still haven't seen how he performs against the top level, and not just against the top level, but doing that consistently where time after time he's going into the studio, he's going to LANs. I feel like that kind of consistency is very difficult to find, and it's been difficult enough that we've only ever seen one Donk.
If it wasn't for Donk, though, there's probably a good chance Kyosuke wouldn't have got the salary he's going to be getting at Falcons, right? So while it seems unfair to hold him to that extreme, there's not many Tier 2 players that get to go into an organization like that and probably earn way more than many Tier 1 players. But the money is not what we want to focus on. We want to focus on the games and what we've seen. And I think it might be fun to focus in on our major winner, because also one of the semi-finalists, James Time. How is James' run going at Paravision? Well, Deity, we can start with you.
I think on an individual level, right, like, James been doing okay. But as a unit, I've not been super impressed by Paravision because there's been a couple of games, and don't worry, I'm not looking into the sky, I just have a monitor that's placed too far up, there we go, and I'll bring it to my first monitor. Like, James been okay individually, and, you know, the other player that falls into the same category, Kicker, he's also been great, but I feel like as a unit, they have this huge spectrum of performances. Like, one day they'll show up and they'll start having a major winning performance against Tier 2.5 players that just woke up for a 10 a.m. game and they're like, what the hell are we playing, right? But then another day it'll be lackluster. It'll be super unimpressive. So I'm not really sure what to make of this team, Trav.
It's funny, isn't it? I mean, whenever I cast Paravision, I always say, like, joking aside, James is one of the best players in Tier 2 right now. I'm talking about a major winner, but it's true. He is one of the best players in Tier 2. They're at that tier. You can't shy away from that. I think Nota is a very exciting talent, and obviously taken from like Amcal, Rush B, those sort of other Tier 2.5 teams. I think he's one that can be molded for the future very impressively and will actually be one of the biggest talents on the team. If you were to ask me a few months ago, I would say that Belchanok is one of the most underrated players in Tier 2. I think he puts in incredibly consistent performances. And I think that Travis, he's got me a sticker in the game. I have some affliction to Travis as a player, even though his name's fucking Alexander. Why is he called Alexander and called himself Travis? One day I'll figure that out. I'm convinced I'm going to have to interview him about it. It needs to happen. But, like, he's a very stable factor in the team. Very stable. And they can rely on him. More recently, that is kind of, Belchanok's fallen off a little bit. Travis was a lot more inconsistent. Over 3 months, when I was covering Compass, Travis was rated 1.04. But in the 1 month of Compass, he was rated like 0.92 or something. Quite a significant difference. I'm not necessarily going to focus too much on his ratings, as that, he can still play an important role in the team. But there are actually rumors flying around that Paravision might be making a change coming soon. I'm seeing, tweets from Russian insiders saying that maybe they're getting Xelo, Xielo from Gun 5, which of course at one point he was rated as good as Tania on that Gun 5 roster, Xelo. So yeah, maybe that's a change that they're looking to bring in some more sort of younger blood and maybe accelerate this team even further. When it comes to the in-game leading conversation, I think Kicker, obviously, he is the designated in-game leader. I find it impossible to ignore the fact that James, who has been an in-game leader for so long, surely he's like a significant secondary voice. Not just on CT, like so many top players are, riflers or whatever, like Nico or Hunter or whoever, of a strong secondary voice on CT. surely he's got a strong secondary voice on this team as well, on both sides of the map. So while he's still AWPing to a very high level, and when you see him play against some of these lesser tier 2 teams, like tier 2.5, like Farah said, it's actually quite evident sometimes that Jane kind of toys with them. Like, he's at that extra 5 to 10% above with his decision making and his positioning, right? So it's a very good team, but they've had a failure of a season. Like, they're always in playoffs, but they failed this season. There's no other way of looking at it. They didn't qualify for the major. They failed pretty badly in the MRQ. Sure, difficult teams to face, but they've got name value to fight against them. And they failed to make Pro League. They're not going to play a big LAN until the second half of the year if they get that opportunity. They were in the grand final of ESL Challenger League to qualify for Pro League. Bait had the 1-0 advantage from coming through the upper bracket in the BO5. Paravision won 2 maps in a row to lead 2-1. They had 2 maps to have a chance to get through to Pro League. Bait won both of them, and they destroyed them on map 5, like 13-3 or something. So it's a great team, great pieces, like I've described, but they failed this season. Simple as that.
Okay, so we've taken a look at our semi-finalists. The Paravision conversation sounds awfully familiar to the one we were all having about Jame in his previous lineups, but there you go. Look at me just throwing damaging grenades there. But let's talk about, we focused on the semi-final teams. Are there any other teams that maybe we haven't focused on that we're playing in Contenders, Wildeity, that you think are important to highlight?
Oh yeah, I think that although it kind of sucks because we started off this podcast while using Favbet as one of the benchmarks for being farmed, but Favbet is a team that I think, with the pieces that they've got and as a unit, they could be a tier 1.5 team if everyone was 10% better. Let's look at the name.
That's a big if, mate. That's a big if.
That is huge ass. That's like,
okay,
that's insane.
Okay, so when I say 10% better, I don't even mean that they need to just like elevate their gameplay by 10%. I'm just saying the general fluctuations that they have where they'll dip by 10%, don't have those across the board, and suddenly you've got a better team. Because listen, I've in the way that Travis described Belchanok, I feel like Smash falls under that exact same category.
That's not unfair.
Because Smash is such an explosive rifler. His entry work is honestly unrivaled. Like, some of the stuff that I've seen him do, the multi-kills he's able to find, he might be one of the reasons that Favbet even made it this far, even though they didn't make it very far at all. And then you've got the experience that Marix has. I feel like Tension, when he's having an A game, suddenly he's elevated to a completely different point. So rather than expecting them to get better, I feel like it's more about seeing them under perhaps better coaching that brings out the best in them. I don't know. It's an idea I've been spitballing a bit.
I love it. So I'm gonna roast you now because it's just too easy. You're like, Favbet could be great if you were more consistent and played better.
Yeah, because they have shown that they can play better.
Okay. That's top tier coaching right there. Just remember, if you want to be better, play better and be more consistent. Okay, Trav, how about you? Any team that you would focus in on?
The thing is, I'm going to be completely real with you here. There's like, hang on, how many teams are in this 16? I think 8 of them, and that's maybe being kind, bad. Like, for the lack of a better term, like, they're genuinely, like, they're all just in that pool of teams that are trying their absolute best to, like, improve somewhat, but I just don't see a future for some of them. I think an example for me is like a team like Amcal, like right now. I just don't see. I don't know what on earth they're doing. They've got Art Frost, who's obviously, highly rated. They haven't been playing with him. They've been playing with a sub called Tommy, and they're just completely one of the most uninspiring teams to watch ever. But we're not focusing on that. I want to focus on something that's a little bit better. A team that I think is going to improve quite significantly, quite quickly, not necessarily off the back of the performances in this tournament, but in the future, is Zero Tenacity. Now, they're known for sticking together as a core 4 3.5 years. Like, it's actually kind of incredible. They've finally decided to pull the plug on Simki, who was one of those players that's been on the team for 3.5 years, and taken in Madden. And I think Madden is a very, very good player, obviously, from what he's done in Tier 1 over the course of history. So that's a significant upgrade, and I think with the players they've got, I think Brute Monster as the AWPer needs to be a lot more consistent. I'm seeing him whiff way too many shots. But for the future, they've placed okay in this tournament. And I think with Madden, they can push on a little bit. There were some other individuals that I could shout out. I think Rush B, who used to have Nota, who's on Paravision now, have two players called Texi and Zinni. They're worth keeping an eye on too. I think they're actually quite talented. They could be maybe getting an upgrade in the future for sure. But other than that, I think I will be real with you. There are some teams that underperformed here, like 500, for example. You know, Iberian Soul were okay, but they had a bit of a deceiving run throughout the tournament. That's like the ex-Movistar Koi, Movistar Riders boys. But some of the wins they got had an asterisk on them. It's like getting a map 1 forfeit win because another team wasn't ready, or like happening to play against a stand-in that hasn't played in like a coach that hasn't played in like 3 years or something, right? So they may have made playoffs, but it's not amazing. I'm happy to call out Zero Tenacity as a positive for the future for me. Unfortunately, I think the others are all just in that mishmash pool of mid, unfortunately.
And if you want to get better, those other teams, we've got great coaching advice for you. Just remember, be more consistent and play better, and you'll be good to go. The Zero Tenacity move is pretty exciting, I think, for next season and to watch some other tournaments with them with the Madden edition. So definitely one to keep an eye on. We're going to move on, though. Your favorite match, Jen. So this is an opportunity for you to just highlight that one match. Obviously, if you're watching and this gets you excited, you can go over to the YaLLa Compass YouTube channel. You can go back. You can find the match. You can rewatch it. You can do that on Twitch as well, or Kick, or wherever it is that you like to watch this stuff. But I'd love each of you now to tell me what your favorite match was, and obviously why you think it's one that deserves a rewatch. We'll start with you. Wildeity, you could jump in there. Which was the match?
I would probably vote for Spirit Academy versus Monty because I think it was a huge aura farm. And it happened on multiple levels. So first off, Spirit Academy, they come into that match late. They have to forfeit the first map, and it's a pretty important one. They end up winning it 2-0 anyway, and they also smash Monty in that... They first take the second map to overtime. It's 1-1 after the forfeit, and then they end up just completely destroying Monty on that last map. And the reason I want to tunnel vision on this one is also because I feel like we saw some really good individual performances from Spirit Academy that didn't center the conversation around Kyosuke. We got to watch Mokujin at his finest when he isn't in the shadow of Kyosuke. So many multi-kills, so many chaotic, weird rounds where he's just powering Spirit Academy through a match where they've already forfeited one. I think it was a treat to watch.
One of the conversations surrounding Spirit Academy, obviously, is that sometimes you can't just focus on one player, on Kyosuke. There are two academies right now who are in a big like talking point in the scene. Navi Junior, for obvious reasons, as we record this, they've won a CCT last night, beating some very good opposition, and they're now 12 places only behind the main Navi roster, right, in the EUVRS. But Spirit Academy, while I think Navi are a very good team and they have incredible individuals, I think Spirit Academy are very often just like focused around that one individual. A lot of Spirit Academy games I watched were pretty... I felt like they were just throwing Kyosuke in with not much thought, and maybe that comes down to the fact we're now hearing that they're practicing without him, and maybe he's starting to move away from the roster because of this future move. And they're practicing with a guy called Maze, I think I read on an NHL TV short or something like that. So I think they're moving on from the Kyosuke era. But what does give me hope, kind of what I mentioned earlier about maybe an organisation coming in to buy the core, maybe if Spirit Academy want to sell it, is that there are good individuals here. I mean, Alcarin is a bit hit and miss, but I think he flies under the radar purely because of how good Kyosuke is. I agree with Faraz on Mokujin. I think he can actually show a very decent level on multiple occasions. I think like the in-game leading does leave a little bit to be desired. But I think without Kyosuke, that will force like Robo to actually, put a bit more hard graft in on that maybe, and maybe prove that he's actually more than he is maybe necessarily showing right now. So I think Sypho is a little bit hit and miss as well. There was at one point, I think, before he went to Spirit Academy that he was trialed by Cloud9 when they still had a team. So clearly a lot of people saw good things in him. I like the roster, but yeah, if I was to pick a match, from the tournament, which I think was most impressive to watch from a purely individual standpoint, I've touched on it already. It was the Favbet game for me. I think it's just, when you look at a match for quality, I think you'd probably look at Paravision versus Astrum. That might have been the highest quality game of the tournament. When you want to look at a match just to see what Kyosuke is truly made of, you look for this game versus Favbet. I'm going to pull it up right now. It was on train. He went 27-9, 169 ADR, 2.65 rating. And that was his second highest rating in his career. And knowing how much he's been farming at this level, that says something, right? So I think if anyone wants to watch that performance back, as I said to you earlier, I've got a few clips that I'll probably try and send you later. Like, it's just so different. He's clearly just so different. And just watching watching to see how someone plays at this level when they're clearly a cut above. That's a great example.
All this contenders talk just gets me really excited for the other contenders that are going to be coming up and for what YaLLa is planning. I mean, I think this is a question that I'm going to, as we do more and more of these episodes, I'll be speaking to different commentators. I'd love to pose it to both of you to kind of wrap this all up. But it is something that comes up a lot. A lot of Counter-Strike fans don't necessarily watch a lot of Tier 2, right? They heard Kyosuke, now everyone is watching the Spirit Academy games, but they tend not to focus too much on it. And it feels like such a loss because they miss these opportunities to really get to jump in on these players when they're first starting out. So it's important for organizations like YaLLa to keep this infrastructure alive, to keep building this Tier 2 space, obviously as well with the VRS system. My question to you after that long-winded explanation is, why is it important for, not necessarily important, let's say, why should you be watching Tier 2? What is it about these games that kind of draws you in and you think people will enjoy to watch as well? Trav?
I think there are many Tier 2 games, which, as I kind of mentioned, from the teams involved in this Contenders, there are a lot of teams that aren't there yet, clearly with a lot to work on. But when you get to playoffs and certain matches in a Swiss stage, for example, there are genuinely some brilliant matches that have crazy moments and some, great players to watch. I think, I touched on it, the Paravision versus Astrum game. That's a game where maybe not a huge amount of people will tune in unless you're a big James superfan or whatever. But even though it's a semi-final, maybe not enough people watched that when they should have. It was a high-quality game. The players that I wanted to perform for both sides did. We saw some old school performances from the players that should be performing well at this level, like Kenzie, like Patsy, for example. And the most important thing, I think, for your viewers, while you'd want to tune in to some of these Tier 2 games, is the fact that there are so many games where you see a player that is obviously destined for great things. I mean, Grix is one that's been talked about a lot in that game that I was sort of, as an example. He's not like setting the world on fire like a rifler would, that has been like with a Donker or Kyosuke in recent times. But I think that Grix has clearly got something about him. There's a reason why a couple of top teams have kind of been sniffing around, seeing if he's available after the move from Aurora to Astrum. Just if you're a watcher of Tier 1, you want to get into Tier 2, just find a player that is talked about a little bit, like do a little bit of research in the tournament, see who's the top rated. There's some obvious picks in there, and just watch them, because that will get you like a first row seat look at what you'll probably be seeing in the future. I mean, not all of them will make it, of course. That's how the scene works, but the random example that I said earlier from like a couple of the Rush B players like Texi and Zinni, I think they're two players that probably not anyone would really care about or know about too much. But I think they're clearly very, very talented riflers and have very good decision making as well. So I think that's ultimately the one answer I give to that question, is that find a couple of players who are the top rated and you're watching maybe the stars of tomorrow. And I think that's plainly very fascinating.
Yeah, I think I would add to that in sort of the same line. I think it really comes down to this feeling of suspense being fulfilled when you finally see the theories you've been crafting in your head about certain Tier 2 individuals finally making it to Tier 1. Well, a couple of the storylines I've been cooking up very recently is that I know that Mokujin is going to be at a Tier 1 level. I know that Casillo is going to be making it. That's Xielo, by the way, from Gun 5. The pronunciation is really weird. Thank you, Hayes, for correcting me on that. And there's also, so Mokujin, Casillo, and Alcoran. Like, these three players, the fact that I'm following now makes me feel so much more involved. It will make me feel so much more involved in Tier 1, because I feel like everybody has a little voice in the back of their head where there's like, oh, I was rooting for that guy, right? And now that I've gotten past the sentimental answer, let me give you my real answer. So if you start looking at Tier 2 players first, then you can have much better odds when betting later on them in Tier 1, because nobody else was watching them, and you know that they're better than the rest.
Great business advice there. Final question. Obviously now all the focus is going to move to the major. That's where all our eyes are for the next few weeks. So I'd love to hear from both of you. I mean, who do you think's going to win it? Wildeity?
Win is kind of a stretch. Do I really want to go with the cop-out answer of just saying Vitality? I don't know. It's hard to say. Maybe I'll leave that one on the table, because I'm still waiting to see how everybody will be doing.
Fence sitter.
I was about to say, how are you? So you shouldn't be a commentator. You should be a desk host, because that's such a desk host move, to just sit on the fence and never actually put your money where your mouth is. We demand an answer. Who is winning the major?
Listen,
you got to put it in your pick'ems, so you're gonna have to make the call.
That's why it's divvied up into multiple stages, so you don't have to pick.
Stop.
Them.
Give
Okay,
us an
fine,
answer.
Fine. You know what? I'm gonna go with the gamble of spirit.
I mean, I'm sorry, like, I just have to say Vitality. Like, I'm just not even gonna try and get around it
Come
because
on.
it's just obvious, dude. Like the storyline, like to win the major, to keep a win streak going. I'm sure they might lose a game in the Swiss or whatever before
Do
they
you think
win
they
the
have
whole
plot
thing.
armor?
No, I just think they're that good. I just think they're that good. Every single piece works perfectly. Every single close contender is getting closer. But they've still got that extra 5-10% when needed, right? I mean, you know, Falcons have the firepower, but it depends if they show up on the day still for me. You know, Nico is having some struggles right now, which have kind of been well documented in these, you know, in these lots of these segments that have been done in Tier 1. Struggling a lot on Nuke, for example. So that being such an important map in their pool, I think you still need them both to perform really well for it to work out for them. Mouse as a roster, as a team, are very, very good, but they don't have the X Factor. They don't have an X Factor player. They're just very, very good across the board. Spirit have the X Factor player, but can you rely on Donk to hard carry every single map against, you know, Vitality? Like, I think Vitality have found a very good way of neutralizing him a little bit in recent games. So I just have to pick Vitality. For the storyline, we want some amazing storylines, obviously. You got Simple on FaZe. We hope he makes playoffs to, you know, beat the Undertaker's going to deny, you know, Vitality this amazing run, and it's going to be stunning and an incredible watch. The crowd's going to go crazy. But yeah, I still think Vitality will win. I think we're going to see some underdog runs though. Yeah, and they're going to show what they're truly made of. I think there are a couple of great examples of that from players in the stage 1, which you should definitely be keeping an eye on for sure.
And that's exactly why you need to pay attention to YaLLa Compass. Make sure that you subscribe. If you enjoy this, like it as well, because you get a chance to see the superstars before they lift those major trophies. We'd love your feedback as well, so drop some comments, and we will see you in a month's time for the next episode.